Alrighty, time to talk about the rise of terrorism. Now, in order to talk about the rise of terrorism, first and foremost, we need to understand what the definition of terrorism is. Now, terrorism is going to be defined as the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of a political aim, of political aims. So this is when you have a political objective that you want done. For example, you want a certain group of people or a certain individual in power. You're going to use fear and intimidation and violence in order to get that done. So this could be simply shooting at people who are enemies of you and murdering them so that other people who try to speak out against you would not do it because they're afraid of being murdered. It could be blowing something up in a way of kind of intimidating people from turning out and voting in an election. Any way you're using violence and intimidation to try to get a political aim is going to be the definition of terrorism, especially when it is used against civilians. Now, when it comes to talking about terrorism, it's important to understand the difference between a terrorist and a freedom fighter. Now, I want you to think for a second, what is the definition and the difference really between a terrorist, so one who practices terrorism, and a freedom fighter, one who is fighting for freedom? Now, in reality, this really comes down to your individual opinion and whether or not you agree with the person who's fighting and what they're fighting for. That's going to be really the definition here. So it's important to understand that a lot of terrorists don't view themselves as terrorists. They view themselves as freedom fighters, even though the vast majority of us would view them as a terrorist. A lot of these people we consider terrorists would view those fighting for freedom, what we view as freedom fighters, more as a terrorist. So it's important to understand that although they are using means that are not good by any means at all, they're not viewing themselves as a terrorist. If we can understand that, it's going to help us kind of understand where they're coming from, help us combat that better and be more effective in understanding the mindset. Now, the first big terrorist attack we're going to be talking about is the Oklahoma City bombing in Oklahoma City in the United States. This happened, and there was 168 who were killed and 680 were injured. Now, what happens here is the man who committed this attack did this because he was angry about the FBI's handling of the Waco siege. This was a compound in Waco, Texas. There was a cult group going on in there. There was a standoff for a number of days. Ultimately, the FBI went in. There was a massive fire, and virtually everyone inside was killed. There was a lot of people who were upset about how the FBI handled that, how the federal government handled it. So this man decided to take this out and try to show how upset he was by using terrorist acts in Oklahoma City, bombing the federal courthouse there. Currently, the type of terrorism that is growing the fastest is going to be right-wing terrorism. You can see right here on this map from 2000 up until 2019, the scale of these massive, these terrorist attacks committed by right-wing terrorists simply in Western countries. Okay, so we've got like Christchurch, New Zealand mosque attack. We've got the Pittsburgh synagogue attack on there as well. These different attacks, you can see them right there. The larger the circle, the more people that would have been killed in that attack. Now, the rise of terrorism when it comes to Islamic terrorism, we're talking about this right now. You have to understand that the Ottoman Empire is going to collapse in 1918 at the end of World War I, and Britain and France are going to set up new boundaries. Now, what's happening here when Britain and France are doing this is Britain is fighting against the Ottoman Empire. In World War I, the Ottomans are going to be aligned with the Germans, so the British and the French are going to be fighting against the Germans and the Ottomans as well as the Austro-Hungarians. They want to kind of pressure the Ottomans and put them in a harder spot. So they're going to really, the British are going to help the Arabs in the region who do not want to be under the control of the Ottomans anymore lead a rebellion. They're going to lead that Arab rebellion. And they're going to promise them their own state after this. We're going to set up an Arab country that you are going to rule independently of us, independent of the Ottomans. And they're going to be really quite happy with this and want this to happen. Then after the war, the British and the French are going to say, hey, not so much. We're actually not going to be doing that. And they're going to divide this region, you can see here on the map, into two different regions. Well, actually three different regions. We're going to have Syria and Lebanon, which is going to be controlled by the French. We're going to have Iraq and Jordan, which is going to be controlled by the British. And we're going to have Palestine region, which is going to be an international zone. So no one's going to be controlling that because of the numbers of religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, that all have some religious significance within that region. We're going to keep an international zone right through there. This is something that the Arabs in the region were not expecting. They were not told that they were going to have these two French and British zone. They thought they were going to get their own countries. This is a broken promise, and this is going to lead to an increase in tension. Then we're going to get Syed Qutb in Egypt. Okay, he's an Egyptian thinker in the 1960s with the Muslim Brotherhood, and he's considered the founder of Islamic extremism. So what's going to happen, first and foremost, is he's going to argue that all Muslims must take up arms against non-believers. And this is going to include Muslims who reject his individual teaching. So even if you're Muslim but you don't believe that you should take up arms against non-believers, you're not considered a true Muslim in his eyes, and therefore people should take up arms against you. Understandably, this is going to cause a lot of concern among those who do not agree with his form of Islamic teaching, especially those who are not considered Muslim. And ultimately, he is going to be viewed as a threat by Nasser, who's going to be leading Egypt in 1968. Nasser wants to repress his power because he views him as a threat to his own power, and thus has Syed Qutb executed. Trying to get rid of his power right through. However, this is going to really backfire. Instead of calming him down and calming his followers down, it actually created a martyr. So now that Qutb is viewed as someone who believed in his cause to the point of death, and he's actually going to gain a lot more followers after his death. Now, we get the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. The Soviets, with the Brezhnev Doctrine, are invading. The Soviets are coming in to try to preserve communism. Now, the Soviets are an atheist country. Afghanistan is predominantly Islamic. So it's going to be a number of people who are going to move to Afghanistan for a religious sort of war to fight to preserve the Islamic status of Afghanistan against the atheist communists coming in. These are going to be the Mujahideen fighters, and they're going to be supported by the United States and the United Kingdom and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. These three countries are supporting them primarily because it's a way of resisting communism, something that all three countries are adamantly opposed to. So the United States, with the Truman Doctrine, is going to be funding these people through Pakistan because they cannot fund them directly. They realize there's some shady things going on. But a lot of these people are going to be followers of Syed Qutb in Egypt, who are going to move and see this as a way of fighting against non-believers, spreading their view of Islam. Then after the Soviet, right away at this time as well, the Soviets are starting to withdraw. Osama bin Laden, who's a Saudi national at this time, since been removed of his citizenship from Saudi Arabia, is going to go here. And Ayman al-Zawahiri. Ayman al-Zawahiri is an Egyptian citizen, follower of Syed Qutb, and they're going to come together, they're going to meet, and they're going to decide that they should form one organization together with this goal of fighting out Western influence and preserving what they view as traditional Islamic countries. And they're going to form Al-Qaeda in 1980. And this is going to be the major terrorist organization that's going to cause a lot of problems for Western countries from this point forward and countries in the Middle East. They're going to view an alliance between the United States and Arab states as bad for true Islamic nations, and thus they need to use fear, violence, and intimidation to get these countries to withdraw from the Middle East. Okay, so they're going to be using terrorism as a way of kicking people out of their country. They've got a political aim. Their political aim is the United States and other Western countries completely withdrawing from the Middle East. Their goal of getting that is using violence and intimidation, oftentimes on individual civilians. Then this is going to lead to a number of different attacks we're going to be talking about. These three attacks all perpetrated by Al-Qaeda. We're going to have the World Trade Center bombing in 1993, in which 6 individuals are going to be killed. They're going to park a truck, just like the Oklahoma City bombing, in the parking garage underneath the World Trade Center, explode that, and hope that this will take down the entire building. It failed. Only 6 individuals were actually killed. Then we're going to have simultaneous truck bombings in Kenya and Tanzania when 224 are going to be killed at the U.S. Embassy. They're going to blow up 2 trucks outside of the embassy, destroying the building and killing virtually everyone. So this is going to be a major attack as well. And we're going to have the USS Cole attack in 2000, which is a suicide attack by boat. A number of Al-Qaeda terrorists were going to get into a little speedboat, pack it with explosives, and ram it into the side of the USS Cole, killing 16 sailors, injuring 39 more. That is all for this section. If you have any questions, comments, put them down below. Good luck.